Hello, everybody. It's Fazbear Entertainment, and I got bored this morning, so I decided to do some research and to kind of sort of grasp the understanding of the possibility of how the entire Five Nights at Freddy's storyline actually is in a more realistic manner. Now, we're going to start off with the Secret of the Mimic being the first in story part of the storyline back in the 1970s. And as we know, it starts off with you being a Fazbear employee going to go seize the assets of this man named Edwin, who was responsible for the creation of not only the Mimic, but all of the prototypes for the Fredbear Family Diner and the FNAF 1 animatronics. And according to the research that I read, back in the 1970s, um, as we know, Edwin's house and the factory were on Fazbear Entertainment property, which back in the 1970s, which it was uncommon but not unheard of that businesses that owned land and housing that employees lived and worked on was a thing back in the 1970s. So Fazbear Entertainment owning the big house on the hill and the factory during that time period was an actual thing in the 1970s. Also, according to what else I read, if a employee went missing on the land that was owned by the company, they would definitely replace him with another employee because they would prioritize the efficiency. Hold on, let me read this real quick. It is highly probable that the company would seek to replace them with another employee or fill the vacant position through standard hiring practices, which their primary concern of the company would be to maintain its operations and ensure productivity. Which, funny enough, as we know according to the Secret of the Mimic, um, Fazbear Entertainment, including William Afton and even Henry Emily, were involved with the scientific studies behind human souls, remnant, and possibly even agony, which, according to research during the 1970s, it was also not unheard of for scientific companies to cover up their company's names with a different company view. So it is highly possible that Fazbear Entertainment was just a cover up regarding the true identity behind Afton Robotics and Fazbear Entertainment just being a cover up name for their scientific company and the true identity behind William Afton and Henry Emily's idea, which using a entertainment company name to cover up a scientific study on human souls would definitely prove to be interesting. Which, as we all know, agony is created through the suffering of a person and then it being fed off of, and the soul remnant being coming out of humans. It is possible that William Afton would have used the mimic as his main priority of being able to not only lure people, but to be able to truly break down the idea behind understanding how the idea behind humanity actually was. My other part of the theory is, you know how in the books, according to the books, Henry was making basically human-like realistic animatronics to basically fill in the void and missing gap of his own daughter. Now, to me, that's kind of sort of giving more of like a Fallout 4 Institute synth kind of vibes, because, I mean, they also designed animatronic or androids to be able to replace humans once they kidnap them and, made a version of their consciousness and then placed into this robot. So I kind of have a feeling that Fazbear Entertainment was a cover up for a huge scientific breakthrough regarding basically taking humans and turning them into robots, is what my idea is behind it. Because, I mean, the idea behind human like animatronics, I mean, the theory behind Gregory being an animatronic due to the whole Vanny's CTR thing, it's possible that they did perfect it around sister location era. And um, it is highly possible that they continued perfecting the AI animatronic idea all the way up to Security Breach. With the base of the Security Breach animatronics being almost pure sentient AI and not being possessed, as far as we know. Still doesn't explain why there was another missing children incident. Maybe they were, you know, like I said before, their souls and consciousness were taken out of their human bodies and then placed into the animatronics, and basically their entire memory is being reset. So I'm kind of getting a Fallout 4 Institute synth vibe from the whole Finance of Phrase lore. But like I said, 1970s, it was not unheard of for companies to own land that was not only business purpose but also living purpose. So the experiment with gas and the animatronics and the souls, for the animatronics to become sentient and self-aware, and AI becoming so advanced it could basically think like it's another individual human being. It's also not impossible within this timeline for them to be able to gain the full mastery behind the memories within the souls and be able to learn how to like factory reset the memories and kind of sort of give a whole new consciousness. Because I mean, we're talking about supernatural powers at this point. So, but what I think is that Fazbear Entertainment is just a cover up for a entire scientific business that during this time frame owned a business on top of living conditions, and after Edwin died they would have had to fill in, and of course William Afton, being pretty much the head of this experiment, would have claimed that place and the factory, which I feel like the factory would have been built over top of the sister location, and in place the factory would have been called Afton Robotics because of the massive amounts of prototypes that were in there. The house would have been on the property, so he wouldn't have to go far from his experiments. That's probably why under the house is a connection to the factory, so he could go there undisclosed and raise no suspicion. Like I said in the books, basically creating full-on replacement animatronic human-like creations to basically fill in the missing position of the missing person, which gives me Fallout 4 synth vibes. AI being an automatic thing in the 1970s, which, you know, is pretty astounding. But to be honest, with it becoming so prominent, so self-aware, honestly, I feel like that the Mimic was actually the first instance of a soul being used into an animatronic, which is probably how they learned how to create an artificial intelligence, was by using real intelligence. But honestly, I feel like all these animatronics, the Fazbear Entertainment name existing from the 1970s all the way to the 2030s, 2040s, is pretty much just a huge operation cover-up regarding the scientific breakthrough on human souls. Does not mean it's a legal operation, so it could be an illegal operation that has perfected itself so well that they had several instances where the parents would report their children missing, but of course there was absolutely no evidence to prove that they were even there when they went missing. So definitely the company perfected its method of being able to hide evidence. Like according to the phone calls, a lot of days for them to be able to properly clean and bleach the floors. Kind of sounds like they were pretty much cleaning up the crime scene and making it so when they came in to investigate, there was nothing to find. But as I said before, this is my theory, my breakdown. But to me, it seems like Fazbear Entertainment is just one huge scientific company hiding in plain sight as a entertainment company, using animatronics to not only lure, but to be basically the platform behind the experiments, and for them to truly openly study the raw power and control that a human soul can have over an inanimate object or even an artificial intelligence. And the fact that William Afton himself got himself fully involved with the experiment by turning himself into one of his own creations, using his children. You can definitely tell around the beginning, starting around Fredbear's to FNAF 1, Henry makes himself, pull back because he was into the experiments with the adults. But when William started expanding into children, with them being a parental figure around this time frame, Henry would have been more of the wiser one and, not want to be involved in, risk accidents happening to his own children, which unfortunately, William being the psychopathic that he is, or sociopathic psychopath, he would have obviously just continued going further and further as, to go as far as he can to get the most understanding of every ounce and aspect of the souls. Obviously, he would have exploited the mimic's capabilities to their fullest with its learning and self-aware, and even starting to become narcissistic traits. So obviously, with Cassidy being the vengeful spirit, he would have obviously already had her powers and abilities and everything about her already noted down. But my theory is Fazbear Entertainment is not an entertainment company. It is a scientific research company hiding in plain sight as a entertainment company. But they are primarily operating to basically scientifically understand the influence that human souls and consciousness have over top of robotics and artificial intelligence. But like I said, this is kind of sort of giving me the Five Nights at Freddy's Fallout 4 type of vibe regarding the start off of the series with disappearances of children, but then later moving down to the fact of no records of disappearances of children, and then all of a sudden we pop back up with Security Breach having a list of disappearances of children, but no known replacements. And then you have Gregory being the random child that has CTR visual disturbances when Vanny walks by, so it's also quite possible that he's also what I'd consider to be a synth, a synthetic humanoid, but that has kind of sort of gone self-conscious and pretty much rogue. And Cassie, since she was also surprisingly influenced by a virus, it's also possible that she was also one of the missing children on top of Gregory. And you just have a couple of synthetic orphan children that are running around getting also inflicted by this problem. But like I said, this is just my theory. This is also trying to make it as realistic in understanding as possible. But yeah, 1970s definitely had a whole different method of business and scientific hiding in plain sight operations. And also the openly ability to replace a missing employee without raising suspicion and continuing the production or experimentation without little to no slowing down operations. But I hope you liked my breakdown and theory. If you're coming from TikTok, I'm glad you guys came over to check this out. If you guys are on YouTube, let me know what you think. I really am open to any more details and suggestions. But everyone have a great day.